There is a form of intelligence the world rarely talks about, not because it is forbidden, but because most people never develop it deeply enough to recognize it. Schools do not teach it. Social media cannot imitate it, and modern culture often mistakes it for something else entirely. Because real intelligence is not noise. It is not constant speaking. It is not emotional performance. It is not trying to appear powerful every second. True intelligence is quieter than that. It reveals itself in composure, in observation, in emotional discipline, in the ability to remain centered while the world around you loses control. And once you begin developing this level of awareness, people notice something different about you, even if they cannot explain why. You stop feeling emotionally available to chaos. You stop reacting impulsively. You stop needing validation from every room you enter, and slowly, your presence changes, not louder, stronger. Niccolo Machiavelli understood something about human nature that most people spend their entire lives ignoring. People are often controlled more by emotion than logic. Fear influences decisions. Insecurity changes behavior. Ego distorts perception, and emotional impulsiveness destroys clarity. That is why the most disciplined minds learn one thing early. The ability to observe without immediately reacting is a form of power. Not power over others, power over yourself. And that changes everything, because most people spend their lives trapped inside emotional reactions they never question. Someone disrespects them, they explode. Someone ignores them, they become desperate for attention. Someone succeeds, they feel threatened. Someone criticizes them, they collapse internally. They move through life emotionally pulled in every direction by temporary feelings. But psychologically intelligent individuals begin to see emotions differently. Not as enemies, but as signals. Signals that reveal fears, attachments, insecurities, patterns, and hidden weaknesses within themselves. That is where self-awareness begins, and self-awareness is dangerous in the best possible way. Because once you become deeply aware of your own mind, other people lose the ability to emotionally control you so easily. You stop needing external approval to feel valuable. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop chasing attention from people who never respected you to begin with. And perhaps most importantly, you stop abandoning your peace just to fit into environments that drain you. Most people do not realize how much energy they waste trying to be accepted, trying to appear interesting, trying to appear important, trying to appear successful, trying to appear confident. But genuine confidence does not perform constantly. Real confidence is calm. It does not need to announce itself every 5 minutes. It does not seek permission to exist. It does not panic in silence. That is why silence becomes one of the most underrated psychological skills a person can develop, because silence reveals everything. It reveals insecurity. It reveals emotional discomfort. It reveals who constantly needs attention. It reveals who cannot sit alone with their own thoughts. Most people speak compulsively because silence makes them uncomfortable. Emotionally disciplined individuals learn to become comfortable inside silence. Not awkward silence, intentional silence, the kind of silence that comes from clarity. And when you become comfortable in silence, you begin noticing things other people completely miss. You notice nervous energy hidden behind arrogance. You notice insecurity disguised as loud confidence. You notice how some people dominate conversations because they fear irrelevance. You notice how others seek validation through constant oversharing. And suddenly, human behavior becomes easier to understand, not because you became manipulative, but because you finally started paying attention. That is one of the biggest differences between emotional impulsiveness and psychological awareness. Most people look. Very few observe. Observation changes your entire relationship with life. You stop judging people only by words. You start watching consistency. Because words are easy, behavior is honest. Anyone can promise loyalty when life is comfortable. Anyone can appear kind when nothing is challenged. Anyone can pretend confidence when everything goes their way. But pressure reveals character. Stress reveals emotional maturity. Failure reveals discipline. Success reveals ego. Conflict reveals self-control. That is why emotionally intelligent people do not rush to trust appearances. They observe patterns, and over time, this creates a completely different perspective on relationships. You stop forcing connections. You stop chasing people emotionally. You stop trying to convince everyone to understand you, because maturity teaches something painful but freeing. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Some people only appreciate you when they benefit from you. Some people only support you when you remain smaller than them. Some people only stay close while you are emotionally convenient. And once you recognize this, boundaries stop feeling cruel. They start feeling necessary. Boundaries are not emotional walls. They are psychological filters. They protect your peace from unnecessary chaos. That does not mean becoming cold or disconnected. It means becoming intentional. Because one of the most dangerous habits in modern society is emotional overexposure. People reveal everything instantly, every frustration, every insecurity, every emotional reaction. But emotionally intelligent individuals understand the value of emotional control. Not emotional suppression, control. There is a difference. Suppression ignores emotion. Control understands emotion without becoming consumed by it. And that distinction changes your entire life. Because once emotions stop controlling your behavior, clarity begins to appear. You make better decisions. You choose relationships more carefully. You speak more intentionally. You protect your focus more seriously, and slowly, your life becomes less chaotic. Not because the world changed, because you changed. Machiavelli understood that perception shapes reality more than people realize. But modern culture misunderstood this idea completely. Many people interpreted psychological awareness as manipulation, as domination, as emotional control over others. But wisdom without self-control becomes destruction. True intelligence does not seek to manipulate people. It seeks to understand human nature while remaining disciplined enough not to become corrupted by ego. That is real mastery. Because the greatest battle is rarely external, it is internal. It is the battle between impulse and discipline, between ego and awareness, between emotional chaos and mental clarity. And most people lose this battle silently every single day. They sabotage themselves emotionally. They destroy opportunities impulsively. They allow temporary feelings to create permanent consequences. Then they wonder why their life feels unstable. A calm mind sees what emotional minds cannot. That is why patience becomes such an underrated advantage. Most people cannot wait, cannot reflect, cannot pause. They react immediately to everything. But intelligent individuals understand timing. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every conflict deserves your energy. Not every criticism deserves your attention. Sometimes silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is emotional discipline. And emotionally disciplined people become difficult to destabilize. That is why calmness feels powerful. Not because calm people intimidate others intentionally, but because emotional stability has become rare. Modern society rewards emotional stimulation constantly. Outrage, drama, attention, seeking, instant reactions, constant noise. People are addicted to emotional intensity because silence forces self-reflection, and many people are terrified of confronting themselves honestly. That is why distraction became an industry, because stillness exposes truth. When you sit alone quietly long enough, you begin seeing yourself clearly. Your habits, your fears, your excuses, your emotional weaknesses, your lack of discipline, your hidden potential. And this is where transformation begins. Not externally, internally. Most people want visible success without invisible discipline. But every strong mind is built privately first. In silence, in discomfort, in self-reflection, in emotional restraint, in moments where nobody is watching. That is why deeply disciplined people often seem different. They are less emotionally reactive, less desperate for attention, less affected by temporary opinions. Not because they feel nothing, but because they trained themselves not to surrender control of their mind to every external event. That level of emotional control changes how others perceive you naturally. People trust calm energy. People respect emotional stability. People feel safer around grounded individuals. And ironically, the less desperately you seek validation, the more naturally people respect your presence, because emotional neediness weakens perception. Desperation is visible. Insecurity is visible. The constant need for approval is visible. But grounded people create a completely different energy. They listen carefully. They speak intentionally. They remain emotionally composed under pressure. And this creates something rare: presence. Not performative presence. Real presence, the kind that cannot be faked through social media quotes or temporary motivation. It is built slowly, through discipline, through awareness, through painful self-reflection, through learning how to stay emotionally balanced when life becomes uncomfortable. And perhaps this is why so few people ever reach this level of intelligence, because it requires honesty, radical honesty, not about the world, about yourself. It requires admitting your emotional weaknesses, admitting your ego, admitting your fears, admitting your lack of discipline, admitting the ways you sabotage your own peace. Most people would rather blame the world than confront themselves honestly. But growth begins the moment excuses end. And this is where deeper awareness becomes life-changing. You stop viewing yourself as a victim of emotions. You begin viewing yourself as responsible for your responses. That shift alone changes your future completely, because life will always contain pressure, disrespect, failure, uncertainty, conflict. But emotional discipline determines whether those experiences destroy you or strengthen you. And over time, something unexpected happens. You stop fearing discomfort. You become mentally stronger because you stop running from challenge emotionally. Most people avoid discomfort constantly. They avoid silence. They avoid criticism. They avoid responsibility. They avoid self-reflection. But avoiding discomfort weakens the mind. Facing reality strengthens it. That is why mature intelligence often appears calm, because calmness is not the absence of emotion. It is emotional control developed through awareness. And in many ways, this becomes a form of freedom. Freedom from impulsive behavior. Freedom from emotional dependency. Freedom from the need to constantly prove yourself. You stop living reactively, you start living intentionally, and intentional living changes everything. Your relationships improve, your focus sharpens, your peace becomes protected, your confidence becomes authentic rather than performative. You begin building a life that reflects clarity instead of chaos. And perhaps the most important realization of all is this: the strongest people are not always the most aggressive, not the loudest, not the most dominant. Often, the strongest people are simply the most emotionally disciplined, because emotional discipline allows wisdom to exist. Without it, intelligence becomes arrogance, confidence becomes ego, awareness becomes manipulation. But with discipline, intelligence becomes clarity, and clarity changes how you move through the world. You stop chasing noise. You stop wasting energy on meaningless conflict. You stop seeking identity through external validation. You become calmer, more observant, more intentional, and slowly you realize something powerful. Peace is not weakness. Peace is control. The ability to remain centered in a chaotic world is one of the rarest forms of strength a person can develop, especially today. So if you want to become psychologically stronger, start here. Observe more than you react. Think more than you speak. Protect your attention carefully. Develop emotional discipline daily. Learn from silence. Strengthen your mind privately. And never allow temporary emotions to control permanent decisions, because the world is already full of noise. Very few people develop clarity, and clarity is unforgettable. If this message resonated with you, comment. I choose clarity over chaos. Not to impress anyone, but to remind yourself that emotional discipline creates inner strength. This channel is not about manipulation, not about superiority, not about hatred. It is about self-awareness, discipline, psychology, emotional intelligence, and learning how to navigate life with calmness, clarity, and purpose. Because sometimes the most powerful transformation happens silently, inside your own mind.